Welcome to our Pirkei Avot Shir. We are on chapter 2 and we're going to start with Mishna 12, and we dedicate this Mishna in memory of Levy ben Moshe Esther and Elisheva Bad Leah, and also Leilu Nishmat Nisim ben Reuven. Okay, Michael, what do you have to say?
Thanks, Rabbi Mashiach. So in this is quite a strange Mishnah, but he gives compliments to his students, and I'll just read the Mishnah and then translate it. Huya Omer, he used to say, Im yihiyu kol chachmei Yisrael bekaf ma'aznayim ve'Eliezer ben Hukanus mikaf shniya machriya et kulam. He used to say, if all the sages of Israel were on one scale of the balance and Rav Eliezer ben Hukanus on the other scale, he would outweigh them all. So we know about Rav Eliezer ben Hukanus was the very tough, conservative pupil who was an extremely talented, it's extremely good memory, and used to be described as a plastered cistern. He continues to say, Abba Shaul Omer Mishmo. Abba Shaul said in his name.
By the way, to interrupt you, sorry. Yeah. We're talking about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was the one who said this statement about Rabbi Eliezer, and Abba Shaul said also in the name of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai.
Yes. Im yihiyu kol chachmei Yisrael mekaf ma'aznayim, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hukanus af imahem, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach bakaf shniya machriya et kulam. If all the sages of Israel were on one scale of the balance, and Rav Eliezer ben Hukanus also was with them, and Rav Elazar ben Arach on the other scale, he would outweigh them all. So this is the star pupil, the favorite pupil of Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai. He would outweigh Rav Eliezer ben Hukanus along with all the other sages of Israel. So he must have held him in great esteem. And what does Rav Chaim of Volodyin say about this? Rabbi Eliezer was like a plastered cistern, as we learned before, with this incredible memory. This alludes to his vast knowledge in all areas of Torah. Rav Elazar was like a fountain. Rav Elazar ben Arach we're referring to here. This refers to his deep understanding of Torah logic. There was a debate in the Talmud as to whether it is more important to have a total command of the material or a deeper understanding of the logic. Rabbi Yochanan held that the greater command is more important. He equates Rabbi Eliezer with his vast knowledge to all the other sages. Abba Shaul held that deeper understanding is more important. Therefore, he equated Rav Elazar with his superior logic to all the other sages. And this is a theme that runs through the next couple of Mishnahs. So let's carry on with now the 13th Mishnah. Amalahem, he said to them, Tsa'u v'ru'u, go out and see, Ezo hi derech tova, see which is the good path to follow, Shidabek ba ha'adam, which a man should cling to. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, ayin tova. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hukanus says, a good eye. And what does Rabbi Yoshua says? Chaver tov, he says, a good friend. Is the important thing. And Rabbi Yosef Omer, Shochein Tov. Rabbi Yosef says a good neighbor. Rabbi Shimon ben Hanania says Haroe et Hanolad, one who can anticipate the outcome. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Lev Tov. Rabbi Eliezer says a good heart. Amar lahem, ro'eh ani et divrei Elazar ben Arach midvreichem, shebichlal devarav davreichem. And Rabbi Hanania ben Zakkai says, I accept the words of Rabbi Elazar ben Arach more than yours, referring to the others, for your words are included in his words. So his reference to a good heart encompasses all of the other Talmidim's suggestions. Let's go back through it again. So he says to them, go out and see what is the good path. So he's suggesting, look, you can study, it's important to study in the Beis Medrash, but really, if you want to be a worldly person, you have to go out at times and look at life and see what is the right way to be. So you have to, perhaps he's suggesting that you should, in order to understand fully, what is the right path, you have to go out of your comfort zone a little bit and see about life a little bit. So he says, Rabbi Eliezer says, a good eye. This means that you have to see what is positive in life. Rambam says about a good eye, and I quote, sufficing with what a person has, and this is from the virtues of character, and the bad eye is its opposite, meaning to say the belittling of things and the eagerness for increase. And he says here, so it's interesting. So basically, the good eye means seeing things positively. You can live your life and just look for the bad in everything. But when you look for the good in things, you're nicer to be. You're a nicer person to be around when you try to point out people's good features, even if he has some bad sides to them. Sometimes it's a good thing to do. It's a positive thing to be positive about people, because ultimately, the good is the essence of a person, and everybody's got a little bit of bad in them. So he's saying that I had to have a good eye to be positive about things, to look at situations where perhaps you've suffered for a certain amount of time, to know that it's almost like a test, or it's almost like conditioning, or it's almost like just a part of teshuvah, that suffering. You look for the good in things. So this is what Rabbi Eliezer ben Hukanus suggested. And
Right, so if I could just interrupt there,
yeah, sure.
Very briefly. Again, it's harder to point out the good things in a person than to point out the bad things, because the bad things are immediately apparent, and there's always something to say. Oh, you can criticize and this and that. It's very easy for a person by default to shoot from the hip and just say, "Oh, I don't like this, I don't like that, I don't like this." But sometimes the good things, which everybody has, that you have to dig a little deeper sometimes. But I think this statement of Rabbi Eliezer ben Hukanus shows us that we need to put in the effort sometimes. Some people are just, you look at them and it's hard to find anything bad with them. You have to dig. But for a lot of people, their good deeds are apparent, but they might have some other things which cloud that over. But it's worth the investment, and it trains a person to always have a positive eye. And I think it's just very, very worthwhile. Okay, yeah. Mike.
So he'll continue. What does Yehoshua say? Rabbi Yehoshua says, a good friend. So this is worthwhile advice, because it doesn't just mean the friend that you perhaps, share a beer with, or it's more like a positive attribute in your life, to have someone who spurs you on to better things. A good friend looks out for you at your times of need, but also is a positive influence. A good friend will help you with your learning, boost your confidence in certain ways, and will be a positive influence, and will push you more and more. Some Mefarshim talk about this good friend being a good wife. Like every great man has every good man has a great woman behind him. So that's Rabbi Yeshua's statement. Rabbi Yosef says a good neighbor. This is very important, because if you put yourself in a situation where sins are accepted around you, you will ultimately be affected by that. So, as we've seen in Rambam's Hilchot Deot, we are urged not to dwell amongst bad neighbors. So this is very, very worthwhile advice. And you can't. If you have bad neighbors, they'll always have a bad effect on you eventually. And to find yourself a good neighbor is a positive attribute. What does Rabbi Shimon say? He says, one who anticipates the outcome. That's quite interesting. Someone who has good intuition about a situation. So where does intuition come from? Intuition, I believe, comes from like a gathered knowledge of life and of situations. Only when you've experienced a lot in life are you able to anticipate outcomes. There's nothing better than someone who has a long vision. If you seek advice from people, it's sometimes you can think you know how a situation will turn out. And then you ask someone, give me your advice, what should I do in this situation? And then they'll come back at you with something you never thought of. And you think to yourself, how did I miss that? How did I miss that situation? And that's so clever of this person. How are they able to see the future in a way that I couldn't at all see? So to be able to have intuition, a good intuition, and anticipate the outcome is a huge, very positive thing to have. Rav Elazar finishes off saying that what you really need is a good heart. And the reason why this was favoured as the best of all of the statements was because it includes everything that we've spoken about earlier. If you have a good heart, you're a positive human being, and that you do things, you go out of your way to help people when at times you don't really want to, or you make it your manner to do good things. A good heart encompasses all of the previous attributes. And again, this was from the favourite pupil, and he's given credit for that in the end. Let's give Rav Chaim of Volodin's commentary on this Mishnah. He commentates on the one who has a good intuition, one who anticipates the outcome. And he says, this Mishnah deals with the path that man should choose, whilst the following Mishnah discusses which path he should avoid. As a rule, each student chose one particular trait that man should pursue, and also advised on how to avoid its opposite. For example, Rav Eliezer advised acquiring the trait of having a good eye and avoiding the trait of having an evil eye. The sole exception is Rav Shimon, who encouraged us to anticipate the outcome of a deed, and warned us not to borrow and not to repay. Why did he advise us to avoid the trait of ignoring the outcome of our deeds? Why did he not advise us to avoid the trait of ignoring the outcome of a deed? To anticipate the outcome of a mitzvah is to recognize an eventual gain in spite of a potentially temporary loss. Not to anticipate the result is to ignore the potential reward and to serve with pure motives. This is better than serving for a reward, as we learned in Avot 2, verse Mishna 1. Rav Shimon would advise us to embrace this desirable trait. The opposite of one who anticipates the reward for mitzvot is one who borrows and does not repay, one who sins and ignores the consequences. When a man sins, he does not anticipate the result of his momentary pleasure. He is borrowing and owes a debt, which can be repaid with repentance. If he fails to repent, he will be forced to repay in an unpleasant manner. This can be compared to a creditor who takes strong measures against his recalcitrant debtors. Thus, Rabbi Shimon adheres to the style of acquiring one trait and avoiding its opposite. He advises us to pursue mitzvot by considering their eventual reward and deter ourselves from sin by remembering its repercussions. And perhaps we should do one more Mishnah, which is the converse or the inverse of these statements. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he again challenges his students to describe what is the opposite of what they've been talking about. So, So Mishnah 14 starts. Omar lahem, he said to them, Tzu'u u'ru'u ezahi derech ra'ah shitrachek mimena la'adam. He said to them, go out and see what is the evil path from which a man should distance himself. Rabbi Eliezer says, ayin ra'ah, an evil eye. So the opposite of what he mentioned in the earlier, in the previous Mishnah. What does it mean, an evil eye? The commentary of Rabbeinu Yonah mentions we need to explain that his question and their answer, as it is known, that is the opposite of a straight way, is the way that a person should distance himself from. And the correct reason that the question was asked is because there are several good traits, the opposite of which are not bad, like the trait of piety, which is a very great virtue. But if one is not pious, no bad will happen. About this, he said a bad eye, meaning to say that a person not say stinginess is not bad, since he doesn't extort or rob from his fellow. But actually, its evil is great, and it is the basis for every bad trait. And from it, he will do every evil thing. And he should not say about this, if I do not reach the final culmination of the virtues, I will not be a pious man, but I will still be righteous in doing that which I was commanded about. And he does not know that it is a lack that cannot be counted. Yes, it will be, yet it will be lacking in his heart at the end of days, as the little that is lacking will be a big lack. As Shlomo, Olav Shalom, said in his wisdom, in Ecclesiastes 10:1, dead flies turn the perfumer's ointment fetid and putrid. So little folly outweighs massive wisdom. He meant to say that just like a fly, which is a small thing, completely destroys a very important thing, the perfumer's ointment, so too is a little foolishness to the glory of a chacham and an honored man, as the trait of miserliness causes a man to be empty of the good traits. It is like we find with the Naval, the Carmelite, because he said in Shemuel, should I take my bread and my water? It is said about him, please Hashem, pay no attention to that empty man, Naval. I don't know what this is.
Yeah, so this incident is with the David HaMelech, because Naval was married to, if I'm not mistaken, married to Abigail, who eventually became the wife of David HaMelech. And Naval, probably as his name implies, Naval is like Nivul Peh. I'm not sure if the two are related, but he spoke quite disparagingly about David HaMelech, and but Abigail was pleading for his life in this particular incident.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken.
So we continue. Rabbi Yosef says, what should you distance yourself from? It says a bad neighbor. So the opposite of what he said in the previous Mishnah. Rabbi Yonah comments on this in he himself being bad to his friend or his neighbors, a bad friend. It's not a good thing. Rav Shimon says one who borrows and does not repay. Rabbeinu Yonah says about this, he could not have said the opposite of the one who sees the consequence of one actions. Remember, in the previous Mishnah, he praised the attribute of having a good intuition, but he couldn't have said the opposite of that. So he said in this Mishnah, what would you say is an evil path which you should avoid? He says, not someone who borrows money and has no idea how he's going to repay it. So, he continues, as everyone distances themselves from this trait in their own, but one is able to cling to it through an action. And so he took something about which a person should see the consequences in action. So in other words, if he could not foresee how he was going to repay the money, he should never have taken it. That's what he's trying to say. So he's using that same concept of foresight in a way that you should have foresight about repaying a loan before you take the loan. So otherwise you're sinning. And Rabbeinu Yonah continues, one who does not see it does not distance himself from the bad path, like the borrower who does not pay, since at the time that he borrowed, he should have thought and seen if he would be able to pay up when the time of the payment will come. And if he's not aware of his own on his own, and if he will have the wherewithal in his hand to pay, he should not borrow now, in view of the duress that he will have. Rather, that he should endure the current duress, even if he very much needs the loan. So, and what does Rab Elazar say? He says an evil heart. An evil heart is the evil path which a man should distance himself from. Again, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, I accept the words of Rab Elazar ben Arach more than yours, for your words are included in his words. So again, he mentions that to have a bad heart includes all of these previous mentioned bad traits. And that
concludes that mission.
Yeah.
Okay, very good, fantastic. So we look forward to next time when we're doing Mishna 15.
Yeah.
And until then, we wish you a wonderful and blessed week.